Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on MorningLine. I'm Nick Barris. We are back at it this week after a week of recorded shows. This is live and direct from Studio A in downtown Nashville. It's good to have you with us. The number on the screen, 737-7587. This morning we're going to be talking about real estate. Again, one of the hottest markets, and it has been for a while in the country, is right here in Middle Tennessee. We talk about real estate periodically. We bring on experts to talk about whether you want to sell your house, what you're getting for your house, what the market's like if you're thinking of buying, all of that. And you're welcome to join in the conversation because, as I said, we have one of the top real estate individuals in the entire state on with us. In fact, he probably can compete with anyone across the country that we sells around here. Bernie Gallerani.
How are you?
Good morning.
Thank you.
To you.
Appreciate it.
Am I right about that?
Yeah. Well, I don't know.
How do you stack up nationally, Bernie? Bernie Gallerani real estate.
Yeah, we do pretty well. Yeah, we do pretty well. There's a lot of good realtors out there in the country. So
sure.
But yeah, I mean, we do a few things okay, and we're always making improvements.
You've been in real estate since 2005 here in Middle Tennessee?
Yep.
Okay, I just want to give some people some primers. He's been on the program before, but just to remind folks about this. And it's funny, he sits down, I go, you think any of your staff sold houses this week? And he goes, oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Well, you have to. I mean, in order to run the company we have, we sell a lot of houses every day, and so yeah, well, we're gonna sell over 600 of them this year, and so yeah, so
it's amazing.
It's good.
I mean, that's a lot of houses when you think how competitive the business is. Anyway, can you clarify, is Nashville or Middle Tennessee still one of the hottest real estate markets in the country?
It is, yeah. We still have about 100 people a day moving here, and
wow.
So it's good. It's a lot of people coming in, and houses are still selling regardless of what people think. The volume of homes, so we typically will see about 5 million in the United States annually. The last couple of years, from 2020 up to about 22, we saw in the range of around 6 million in the country.
Okay.
We're going to be back down into about the 5 million, high 4.8, 4.9 million this year. So if you look at across the board, if we typically see an average of about 5 million homes sell per year, take 2020, 21 out, because that was a very, and part of 22 out, that was a very unusual time for real estate, where we saw about 1 million more sales. But we're getting back to normal.
Getting back to normal. And new homes being built, are we talking about existing homes being sold, or are we seeing construction still at a pretty good pace?
Construction has slowed.
Okay, but I still see subdivisions popping up all over the place.
Yeah, they are. It's still all happening. People are still purchasing new properties, and it's not like it was. It was pretty much on fire in 2021, and so, but that has slowed a bit. And when I say it's slowed down, it doesn't mean that it's bad or it's poor or it's not happening. It absolutely is happening at a fairly decent rate. The reason why we have so much new construction going on in this particular city is because we have so many new people moving to the city, right? We talked about 100 people moving here a day. So when you look at that, they have to go somewhere, right? And so there's only so many resale of homes that we can have in order to accommodate the flux of people coming in. So new construction in the city of Nashville has to happen to support all the people. But you're also seeing with that apartment buildings going up that you normally didn't see, and those kinds of things. So, yes, new construction still fairly strong. Resales in the market are fairly strong. We're going to talk a lot about interest rates, as we know. We talked about off air today. But what's really interesting is even with the interest rates as high as people think they are, it's obviously been worse over the last 50 years in the history of our country. Interest rates have been high, but yet people are still buying.
All right, and that's what I want to get into. We can talk broad range, a lot of topics on real estate. When you came on last time, we hopped around and covered a lot. And today, I asked Bernie, well, what should we talk about? First and foremost today, and you said interest rates, but I think it's smart. Let's get into that a bit. Interest rates pretty much, in a lot of ways, can drive how quickly homes are selling or not. And we've heard about how interest rates of late have obviously gone up a bit. Some people freaking out, wow, it's getting up, and you got to give those numbers. I mean, those of us old enough to remember know that, if you're complaining right now, you are spoiled. You have no idea how much interest rates were higher at another time?
Well, I have to empathize with folks because in 2020 or 21 and 22, we saw historically, mid to lower 3% interest rates.
Holy cow, it was awesome.
It was awesome.
But why was that?
Well, because we were in a very challenging time in our country and in the world with COVID.
Yep.
And so when we look at some of the things, if you go back in the history of interest rates, there's always something catastrophic going on inside of our country. Things that create uncertainty in our world or in our country, so we adjust, or the government adjusts rates or the cost of doing money. So if everyone wants to know what interest rates are, it's our fee that we pay in order to receive money. So it's what our country sets, the Fed set on that rate. So that's our cost of borrowing money. And so the Feds make it, reserve make it very attractive when times are really difficult. When we had COVID, for example, that's the freshest thing on all of our minds, is when COVID had approached us, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of money was getting tossed around, and they wanted to keep real estate transactions going, and so they lowered those rates. Car loans were down, boat loans were down, everything to borrow money was down. And so what they try to do is they try to entice consumer spending, they lower the rates, make it more affordable, and when those times start to dissipate, the country gets back to some normalcy, then those rates have to go back up. So it's interesting, and I'll share with the viewers today. We went back to 1971 in our rates, and from 1971...
This is really interesting to look at.
So it's really interesting. So from 71 to 22, we have 51 years of rate collection. So we're looking at data from rates. And we had 34 years where the interest rate was over 5%. We had 29 of those 51 years where they were over 7%. We had 12 years where they were under 5% and only 4 years where they were under 4%. So when you look at the majority of what rates have done over the last 51 years, at 7.5%, we are actually in a normal market for what has happened over the last 51 years. Nick, here's the challenge. The challenge is the last thing we really remember that we want to pay attention to is the 3.5% interest rate. So folks right now are saying we would rather wait till the interest rates drop down to 3.5% or 4%. Here's the challenge.
They're not going to do that anymore.
They're not going to do it. And if they do it, that means that we have something in our country that is not going well. And then that's going to create consumer pause. And when consumers pause and they don't purchase, then that's what drops interest rates. Unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you want to look at it, people are still buying right now. Even though some people say no one's buying homes, we're not experiencing that. I mean, I'm personally putting under contract anywhere from 13 to 15 new homes every week inside of my company. So homes are still selling. They're selling at the rate they were in 18 and 19 and 16 and 14, and so they're still the same as they are today. It's not 2020, it's not 21 or 22, but it certainly is normal.
I was looking at this that you printed up. I mean, just think about it. 1981.
As you see.
I mean, you're looking at 1980, and I know that's going back a while. The interest rate was 16%, all right? 16% in 1981. And really, since 2010, so really the last 13 years, we've had it under 5%, okay? So you're kind of spoiled thinking that way. Under 5% is really, really good. There were people who had homes that they had purchased years ago, maybe in the 90s, at a 10% interest rate. When it dropped down and, to the 3%, you could refinance and save a ton of money. A lot of people did refinancing then. But I mean, you look at these numbers, and really over the last 10 to 13 years, we've been spoiled with under 5%. But like you said, the majority of the time, if you go back historically, it's been much higher than that.
Well, here's what's interesting. We had between 2003 and 2005 just slightly under 6. But then we had 2006, 7, and 8 where we were at 6.5 or 6.25.
That's right.
And then if you look at 2008 where we had the collapse of basically our recession in 08, that's what started dropping it down, right? So we had the Bush administration, that we had the Obama administration. What happened was they were creating programs because of this 08 crash to try to stimulate the market, right? If we can all go back that far, we can remember how devastating the 08 crash was, right? And then we look at this 5.38 and it starts going down into the 5s and 4s. When it's going down into 5s and 4s, it's because there's uncertainty in the country, and the United States government is trying to create or stimulate purchasing.
To borrow. You want to get
more borrow. And what happens is, so now we had COVID that hit, obviously, and that created even a deeper dive into lower interest rates. And then all of a sudden, Nick, I hate to have to say this, but we got to pay that money back. Yeah. All the stimulus money, all the COVID money, all the, you know, I was laughing with somebody the other day, and they're like, I remember those $1,200 checks everyone got?
Oh, you knew the bills coming due.
The bills due.
Yeah.
And the bills due, and the way we have to pay that back to fluctuate with the inflation is the rates.
Yep, and that's exactly how it plays out. Listen, 3.15% in 2021. Those days are gone. Maybe you wish those to come back. You don't, because that means we're in another pandemic. We'll take a break, and we'll get into how these interest rates play out. You heard Bernie say, despite the rising interest rates, what's the current rate right now?
It's about 7.5.
About 7.5. Homes are still selling. It may be that they're on the market longer, and maybe because of that, the price of homes have maybe come down a bit. We'll see if that's the case or not. We can take some phone calls as well. We're going to cover a lot of ground this morning with him. If you're thinking of selling, if you're thinking of buying, give us a call. We can work you through some of the details on that. Back with our guest right after this. We are back on MorningLine. Real estate ace Bernie Gallerani is with us. We're taking your phone calls if you'd like to join in the conversation, talking about interest rates. The fact is, now interest rates are up around 7%. As recently as, just last year, it was 5.53. 2 years ago, 3.15, which was about as low as you can go. And people are now kind of like, whoa, 7%. But now, does this mean then that maybe some buyers are finding better deals because homeowners aren't able to sell as quickly, so maybe they're lowering the prices, or is the value of homes still stayed pretty high in Middle Tennessee?
Yeah, I think across the country, anyway, we're seeing about a 7% property increase still.
Still?
Absolutely.
Even with interest rates. I mean, I would think some homes don't sell as quickly as they did before, or are they?
Well, let's go back to 2000. We talked about 2008 before the break.
Okay.
I had homes back in those days and showing reports on what we call an absorption rate. An absorption rate is the amount of time it takes from the time the house hits the market until it actually closes. Okay. And we were finding the absorption rates in some areas as low as 4 months and as high as 18 to 24 months on the market before closing. So the higher the price points back in 08, 9 and 10, 11, 12, those kinds of things, we would see a 4 to maybe 24 months, 4 months to 24 month, what we call an absorption rate. Right now it's 2 months. And so when you look at it and go, well, nothing is really selling. Well, right now the absorption rate in our area is about 2 months. And so when you look at the 60 or so days that it takes to sell a house, in comparison to 20 and 21 and 22, when it took 4 minutes to sell it. Right. I mean, homes were actually selling before they actually hit the active market.
Yeah.
Right. And so when you look at the time, and I'm being funny, but let's say it was a few days on the market and off the market, 2 months seems like an eternity to most people. Well, when you have something so great that all of a sudden changes to 2 months, the housing market's falling apart. In reality, the housing market was having some challenges in 08 when it was 4 months to 24 months to sell a property. So the difference is we're just not used to seeing it in the last 36 or so months, so we're panicking.
Okay, so things maybe, you're not used to it, but maybe it's getting back to where it should be. So would you characterize the market right now as a buyer or seller's market? It was certainly a seller's market a couple of years back when you said you could sell it in 4 minutes. What is it now?
I definitely still believe it's a seller's market.
It's still a seller. So if someone's watching right now thinking maybe I might want to downsize, I've got this big home, the kids are gone, I want to sell it, now's a good time still.
Well, think about this. We had about 20%, in some areas much larger than this, so I'm just going to give you the statistical numbers in Nashville. We had about 20 to 22% of property increase per year for 3 years. So we have so if you have had your home for 3 years, you've had over a 60% property value increase.
That is unbelievable.
That's right. So when you say, is it a seller's market? It is. But let me also give you a different challenge. Most people that didn't sell their home during those last 36 months refinanced those properties at a 3 or 3.5% interest rate, Nick. And the challenge with it right now is they don't want to get into a 7.5 and leave a 3.5. However, they have hundreds of thousands of dollars of equity in that home they didn't have 36 months ago. And so when you look at this going, is it a seller's market? Yes. Are they losing that money today? No, that money is still there and is still protected. I think the biggest fear in people is that they aren't getting what they thought they were getting. So watch. This is fun. If we had a 21% property increase, a lot of that was those overbidding. So we talked about, I think on the last show, $30, $50, $80, $100,000 over asking price.
Which is crazy, just to get the house.
That's only happening about 25% of the time right now. So let's just say 2.5 out of 10 are getting a bidding war on their house. The other 7.5% are not, right, or 75% are not. So when you look at the market today and you say, well, gosh, how do I get a bidding war? You can have that. It's got to be a great looking property in really great condition and fairly priced, because it is a price war, right? What do they say? It's a beauty contest and a price war. So it's a beauty contest. It's the best looking house, the best conditioned house with the most attractive price. If you have those combinations in place, then you can get a bidding war on the house, and it's very likely that'll happen. Our challenge as realtors today is that we're still working with the homeowner, the consumer, bringing them down into reality of what it really is, and those bidding wars are not happening because the prices are still too high. So they're asking too much money for those homes, and they're having to do price adjustments, and because they're we call it fantasy land and reality, right? Our want and then the reality of it. The fantasy land side says I want $600,000. The reality side says that it's only worth $550. It was never worth $600. Their mindset is just that they think they can get $600, and then they think the market's bad.
All right, so when you go that way, in our neighborhood, we have a property down the road from us that's been on the for sale now, I think, for 3 or 4 months, and it's property, actually. I don't think there's a home on this land, but it's just... So we looked at it, like, well, they're crazy if they think they're going to get this much money. And it's a nice area, and it's worth a lot of money, but they're asking way more. Now, the longer that sits on the market like that, is that bad? Or, is it you just go back in and eventually maybe they decide to lower the amount? Is there a detriment to overpricing and staying at that point and allowing your land or home to be on the market for a long period of time? When I say that, I mean months at a time.
Well, I think we shared on one of the other episodes we did together, when something hits the market and it's brand new, it has its most appeal. The more that it's on the market, the longer days it sits there, the less appeal.
We did talk about that. You said the longer, which makes sense. Just human nature, kind of looking at that.
Using fruit as an example, if you remember.
Yes, exactly.
Right, it's kind of picked over fruit.
Yeah, the leftover fruit.
Yeah, that's right. And so how do you make that fruit more attractive, more less bruised, right? Is you adjust the price. Here's what's interesting. If the consumer's looking for a home today and they're coming to your home and they're saying no to it over and over and over and over again, they're telling you something is wrong with the price of the property based on its condition. The challenge that a lot of consumers will have, or sellers will have today, is they believe, well, the right buyer hasn't shown up. Maybe the right buyer has shown up, they've just seen the overprice, and they're not willing to accept that, and then they're finding things that are equally as great quality, just a more attractive price, and those are the properties that get picked.
Makes sense. All right, so this just hit me as I was hearing you talk about finding the property, the best deal. Is there a way, what tips do you give and what do you use for your clients if you're trying to find a deal out there? Meaning, finding a home that somehow has been mistakenly underpriced, and I'm not talking about a fixer-upper or something like that necessarily, but trying to find. Let me just give you an example. My brother lives in Boise, Idaho, and he sold his home and was looking around, and there was a very nice neighborhood. They were just looking online, and they looked at this bunch of homes, and there was one home that popped up, and they were just looking at the pictures that were on it, and just, oh, this looks awful, and let's just keep going. Well, they were in the neighborhood looking at another house, and they drove by that house that they thought looked awful. Just the way it was presented online. And they stopped and they went in there and they go, wow, this is really nice. They just did a really lousy job of pushing it online. And they ended up making an offer. The home had been on the market for a while, but no one had bought it. And my brother got, I believe now, and they fixed it up since, a great deal because it was poorly presented. I don't know, it wasn't staged right, the pictures, I don't know if they tried to sell it themselves or it was some real estate agent that just wasn't paying attention. But because of that, and only because they happened to drive by and stop themselves to look, because based on what they saw online in the listing, turned them off probably with everyone else. And they went and saw it and they go, whoa, in this neighborhood, at this price, yeah, let's take it. So I'm using that as an example of they got lucky, I think, and they found that. That probably doesn't happen too often. How do you go about finding deals? Or are they out there?
Well, I'll address that. It's not a surprise, and it happens a lot, where the realtor who's listing the property misses the highlights of the property, and you can show pictures of the exterior of the home. Let's just say an example. It's kind of think what I'm hearing you say, and it wasn't all that attractive.
And the interior was dark. The pictures they put on just looked dark. It didn't look appealing. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think that we can all find beauty in something, right?
Yeah.
And maybe your brother looked at this and said, I think there's a lot of potential here.
Once they saw it in person, but online they didn't care for it.
That is such the great point that you brought up. Shoppers look online today. If you're doing something cheap, and I don't know the realtor what they did. I'm just saying, if you don't do it right, like there's a lot of people out there that try to sell their home as a buy owner. I don't really understand it, because statistically it shows over and over again that buy owners lose about 16% more than they would if they listed it with a realtor.
Yeah, because they're going to say, I'll sell it myself and I don't have to pay that realtor fee. But you're saying in the big picture, you bring them so many more people looking at this, you can sell it for more and make more than whatever that fee is.
Normally that's almost the case 100% of the time. When you look at it, for sale by,
plus you don't have the headache.
Let's say, for example, the for sale by owner says, I don't want to pay the realtor the money, and I get that. Everyone wants to save and net the most they can, right? But in the same time, if they're trying to save money and they're selling it below what they really could sell it for, are they really saving money? And I always say to people who are buy owners, you typically have somebody who is having financing issues who buys a buy owner, or somebody that knows that the buy owner is not paying a commission, so they negotiate that off the seller. So then what was the gain, right?
Yeah.
And so all that being said, but to answer your question about your brother, yes, I would guess to say that somebody can get a deal, but it's not very often. If you don't mind, I'll explain if we have a minute.
Sure.
If the property's presented correctly, the pictures are done professionally, and it's professionally packaged in a manner that makes it attractive, it will have a lot of buyers that'll go in there, as long as the price is in line. If a home is priced too low, let's just say, because that was really how you started the question, is what if they underprice it? Consumers are smart, buyers are smart, and if you're getting a lot of people into that home, which is the idea, there is going to be what we call a bidding war. So if we go back to what happened early 36 months ago, few houses on the market, more buyers. What caused the buyers to come out was the interest rates. So what caused the buyers to come out were the low interest rates, low inventory, big bidding wars. It didn't matter what that house was listed for, it went over. If the home is if the home is priced too low and it's attractive, it's going to get a bidding war and most likely go over ask. If it's priced too high, you don't get a lot of people come to look at it, and then it doesn't get that traffic, and then you don't get a bidding war. So can you get a deal? I'm sure you can. Out of the nearly 2,000 houses I have personally sold, and almost 7,000 houses our company has sold, it doesn't happen very often. Very rarely do we ever see a house. A seller might believe they actually got a buyer might believe they got a really good deal. A seller who resells the house again 3, 4, 5 years later might think they stole it from the last particular seller. But in reality, it always traded for a purpose. So, for example, if somebody says, well, it needed carpet and paint, and I remodeled the kitchen, and then the value went up. Yes, those are called flippers who go in and paint, make carpet, take walls down, remodel kitchens and baths, and they sell it. But for the most part, you still had to invest a whole bunch of money in it to bring it up to a high quality of selling standard.
Yeah, the flipper programs on all those HGTV shows and everything, they've gone away, because you just can't find that. Now it's more about just fixing up your home. If you notice that, you can't. I mean, it used to be where you could go out there, find a deal, turn around. Flipping is really hard, right? I mean, it's just, in this day and age now, if you notice that, you may have dealt with some of that, back when it was hot, right? Did you have flippers coming to you, or heck, you yourself have probably flipped a few homes?
It's not as prevalent as it was.
It's just
the deals just aren't there right now. And I can get into believe it or not, interest rates play a big factor in this, because those flippers, plus there's tax issues. When somebody goes and flips a house, there's a high level of tax issues involved there. So you got to hold the property for a certain amount of time. You have to make it a personal residence for a certain amount of time. And if you're just flipping a property, there's massive tax issues. So it's all of that is not lining up today.
Even back then, but even more so today, if you don't know what you're doing, you jump into flip, you're going to lose money. I mean, and you can lose money big time. And there have been some people, it doesn't always work out great like you see on those programs where, we got this much over what we were asking.
Well, I have people now that recently just had a conversation within the last 48 hours of somebody who was taking a massive hit on a flip job. And they were saying, hey, listen, they're willing to lose about $40,000 on this deal, but they got to get rid of it.
Yeah, they have no choice.
They bought it to flip it. They thought they'd make money, and yet they're going to probably lose $30,000-$40,000 on the sale.
Yeah.
And I have one client of mine that had something very similar to that happen to her, and she was taking a massive hit and selling it, and it was a flip job.
Gotta be careful. It's like day trading or anything. You better know what you're doing. We'll take a break. We'll be back.
That's for sure.
More really good advice from our realtor buddy here right after this. Stay with us. We are back on MorningLine. Thank you for joining us. Bernie Gallerani is with us, and he is a real estate agent here in Middle Tennessee. Runs his own company, sells hundreds of houses, 600 to be sold this year in Middle Tennessee, correct?
We'll do just over that.
There's real estate agents out there. They don't sell in a whole year one house.
Well, I mean, they can. They just choose not to.
Well, no, who chooses not to?
Well, you have to. Well, I mean, you've been in this business for how long?
The TV news business.
Yeah, how long?
Yeah, more than 30 years.
30 years. And did you jump right in this chair, or did you have to do something behind the scenes?
I paid my dues, and you work your way to a certain place, and you get better as you go along.
So you got to be willing to pay your dues, and
right.
And you have to be willing to.
Like anything else, I guess.
Anything. And I always tell. I do professional coaching for realtors around the country, and I'll say, if this was easy, everybody would do it, and if everybody could do it, then it wouldn't make what we do special. And so let's just be special, and let's work harder than everybody else, and let's be educated, and so yeah. So, but I want to tap on, because there's a lot of renters out there right now that are holding on to their rentals in hopes that these rates will change in their favor, so they can purchase. Okay.
Do this for me then. Go on that basis. My son graduated from college. He's working in Knoxville now. He and his girlfriend have an apartment. He's got a good job. They're not making a fortune, but the two of them work into it. And he's like, Dad, I'll never be able to afford a house. And I'm like, oh, sure you will at some point. He's looking at the interest rates. He's paying rent right now, which is equivalent to what many people I think are paying close to for their home mortgage. But the big thing that's getting him is a down payment. So I'll just shut up but let you pick up on how you go about doing it. So in a way, what he's doing is what you said. They're in this apartment, paying rent, building no equity, waiting to the time's right to make sure they want to stay in a place as well. But what do they have to do? I just wanted to say, there's an example of a real person that you're talking about. Yeah,
so there's a lot of options out there for people, but let's just break down. We're just going to say $1,500 a month. Okay. So you got a $1,500 or $2,000 a month rental payment. Okay. Do you know what he's paying for rent there?
Yeah, it's right around, I think, $1,700.
$1,700. Okay. And I heard one the other day was paying $3,500 for a rent.
That is more than my home mortgage. Now, I don't have a giant palatial estate, but I have a very nice home on 15 acres. And I'm paying less than that on my mortgage than rent.
And you bought it when?
And I bought it 3 years ago.
And what was your rate then?
Gosh, it had to be, it was low. It was 3 or 4.
So this is the challenge like your son is dealing with.
Exactly.
And
he doesn't have
the
same benefit that I did 3 years ago. Right.
So here's what's really great. If you're waiting for the interest rates to drop, the likelihood of them dropping significant enough for you to justify to purchase is probably never going to happen.
Yeah, I think he realizes that.
Okay. There's programs right now we call a 1-1 buy down or a 2-1 buy down, where they can go in and they can buy down the rate. Now watch, this is really
you told me about this.
Okay. So we can buy down the rate a point, 2 points. We can buy it down 2 points. So let's just say we're at 7.5.
Okay.
So who wants a 5.5 interest rate, right? Most people would say, I would do a 5.5. We can actually have seller contribution into buying that rate down so it's not costing your son anything. Then for the first year, he gets a 5.5. The second year, he gets a 6.5. And if in the third year, when we in the second year going in the third year, if the rates haven't dropped down to 5.5% or 6.5% or 4%, which is what everyone's waiting for, then you could refinance it if it does, right? And there's a great saying, and I love this one. It says, marry the house and date the rate.
Okay.
Marry the house and date the rate. So find your home that you love, marry it, love it, engage in it, and date the rate, which means you're not 100% committed to the rate. You're just dating it until the rates go down.
But why would the seller do that for you?
because the home's sitting on the market, not selling.
Oh, okay. So if it's the right market, then you say, hey, would you agree to work with us on the interest rates here?
Let's just use $400,000.
Okay.
Let's assume it costs you $10,000 to buy the rate down. Mm-hmm. The seller, instead of negotiating $10,000 off the sales price, selling it for, let's say, $390, they give you the $10,000 to buy the rate down.
Okay.
All of a sudden, now you have a rate, let's just say, at 5.5%. Mm-hmm. So you have that rate for 1 year, so your payment is low, probably lower than your son is paying for rent today.
Sure.
Year 2, it goes up to, let's say, 6%. It's a little bit higher, but still better than what it is at 7.5%. If the rates don't drop down,
if they're still at 7.5% 3 years later, then it goes
up. Eventually goes up.
Okay, but maybe at that point you're ready to pay that. You can afford to do it.
That's exactly right. And the other thing, and what most people forget about, think about this: when you're renting, you're throwing it out, throwing it away. Mm-hmm. It's like just tossing it outside and letting the wind blow it. You're like, well, I have a roof over my head. Well, if we can get you into that same thing and you can develop 7 to 10% equity in that property, then you have 20% equity in that $400,000 home. So in 2 years, right? So let's just say it's 10% a year at $400,000. So you have $40,000 of equity in 12 months.
That's awesome.
Or $80,000 of equity in that time frame. So remember this: about every 10 years, a house doubles in price. Yeah. So once your income goes up, if the rates never adjust, let's assume they don't. Just for the purpose of this conversation, they never go down lower than 7%. I'm not saying they aren't. I'm saying let's just assume they aren't. If you keep it 7.5%, you're better off owning a home and collecting property value equity than you are throwing the money away in rent and paying the 7.5% interest rate.
Yeah.
If you look at the two things, you're like, okay, well, Bernie, those are a wash. I'm paying 7.5%. I get 7.5%. It's a wash. Correct. Mm-hmm. It's a wash. That's really great, but in the end of the day, you get all these write-offs when you own a home that you don't have unless you own a home. So I just want to say this to the people who are listening. I understand that you can't afford maybe what you want to afford at $400,000 or $500,000. You may have to choose to buy something less, let's say $350,000, to fit into that financial budget that you have. It's better to own than it is to rent.
It just is. The only time I would say otherwise is if you're living someplace where you think you're only going to be for a short period of time. I understand. You want to buy a home, you're going to be renting because you know you're going to leave in a year or two. Of course, I know a lot of people that thought that's the case, and 15 years later they're still here. But here's the thing that's the stumbling block beyond that. Everything you said made perfect sense. The big thing that seems to hold back people like my son and others is not only the interest rates, but the down payment. And that's the trick. Can you talk a little bit about how much you have to put down and what it means depending on how much you're able to put down on a house?
So watch, this is so great.
Okay.
So you can go FHA right now. First of all, there's THDA programs out there where there's no money down.
For first-time home buyers?
Yes.
Okay.
$0. Second, we have a 3.5% on an FHA. 3.5% on a $300,000 or $400,000 home is not a whole bunch of money, right? We can have sellers concessions, so sellers pay for things like buy-down programs for interest rates. They'll pay for closing costs, things like that. One of the things that the consumer should consider is if a home is sitting on the market and it's not selling, which is really what most people feel is happening. I don't believe that that's the truth, but most people do feel that the market's really bad. If a seller is going to negotiate off the price, just use that money and finance that difference in the loan. So in other words, the seller contributes, let's say, $15,000 to your son buying a home.
Yeah.
He's financing those options inside of that mortgage, but he's spreading that out over 30 years.
Yeah.
He's not going to own it probably 30 years.
No.
So in the end, he benefits. But here's what's really great. If he buys it, he gets in the home, whether he buys a 2-1 buy down or he gets into just a 7% interest rate, whatever he chooses to do, he's going to have options 3, 4, 5, 6 years from now with the equity that he has in home. Now, let's get to mortgage insurance.
Okay, but before you get to that, just realistically, though, for some of the size of the home you were talking about, how much money does a person have to put down? If they're going through one of these programs, hey, if you're buying a $300,000 home, how much do you need in a down payment, probably?
3.5%.
Okay, so that's what? The 10% would be $30,000. So it's about $3,000.
$3,000. Yeah,
$4,000
on a $300,000 home, so at $3,500.
Oh, well, that's doable.
Yeah. Okay. Let's just say it's 7,000. Let's say it's 8,000. Whatever it might be. Okay. Here's what's great. When you get into 3.5, you're gonna have mortgage insurance, and anything that's less than 20% of equity value in the property.
Okay.
So if somebody puts 3.5% down, they're gonna have mortgage insurance that they'll pay in addition to that. And it'll be an increase of that payment. If they buy now and they refinance it in a couple years, that 20% of that mortgage insurance, or that value of that mortgage insurance, is going to go away. That cost of that mortgage insurance is going to go away, because if they refinance the property, let's say in 2 or 2.5 years, and we have the property increase, then the value of that home will have exceeded that 20%
so you don't
and
have
then they
to
won't have to pay that mortgage insurance.
And that'll save you money overall.
Absolutely. It saves you a lot of money, several $100s a month.
Well, I mean, that's what I was trying to tell my son. And this is great. I got to put you in touch with him. If he comes here, we're going to have you buy a house for him, all right? But here's the thing. It's like, Huey, if you can find a way to, get together and mom and dad will help you or whatever, $3,000 to $4,000 on a down payment, you can get through that and you find the right property, you're going to be paying less potentially on your mortgage per month than you are right now for your apartment.
Well, let's assume he pays the same. Even if he pays the same, look at the tax write-off, look at the equity he gets on the property. People who rent don't have the options who people are paying the same amount of money and living in a home. Even if you're paying a few $100s more on your mortgage payment than you are on your rental payment, look at the equity position that you get on your home. It really doesn't make any sense. And you said it best, and thank you for bringing it up. If you're going to be here for 1 or 2 years, just rent.
Yeah.
If you're going to stay here for long periods of time and you know you're going to be here for 5, 6, 7 years, it only makes sense to buy. And what I'm trying to help the consumer, whether they choose our real estate company or they go with any of the other almost 15,000 that are licensed, waiting should not be an option if you're planning on staying here, because if you're waiting for interest rates to drop, you will be waiting a long time.
Yeah.
And if the interest rates do drop, you have another concern that there's something going on inside of the country that is causing that to happen.
Yeah, which is bad. Listen, we'll take a break. Our final segment with you right after this. Stay with us. We are back on Morning Line. Bernie Gallerani is with us, the real estate ace here in Middle Tennessee. Gosh, like I said, I learned a ton from you, man. You're really good. Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of a dummy when it comes to real estate, and I've been doing these shows for a while, but you do a great job of explaining. I can understand why you train around the country.
Yeah.
And listen, we talked about this last time you were on. It's worth mentioning again. You even say you offer this service, but you're not making a lot of money on this. You see the TV commercials all the time, just come to us and we'll sell your home for you. You don't have to worry about it. Sell your home in 2 weeks, instant offer. You guys offer that as well. Maybe how do you want to walk folks through why they would do that?
Yeah, it's pretty simple. If you go to our website at BernieGallerani.com, there's a big old button on there.
It's up there, right there.
Yeah, that's exactly what it looks like, instant offer on there. And you can go in. What we do is we charge the same 6%. We have a marketing fee on it. We take the responsibility. You call us, we come in, we write you an offer. It's a cash offer. You can close as soon as 2 weeks. We take the response. We're just going to turn around and sell the property. We're not going to rent it or keep it. We don't believe so. We've never rented or kept any of them. We just turn around and sell them. And what we're doing is taking the burden off of the seller from the showings, the fixing them up, the home inspections. We'll do a home inspection to make sure it's not collapsing on us or anything. But other than that, we don't ask the seller to do any repairs or anything like that. So if you want an opportunity to sell your home, it's less than desirable for a showing, or you just want a quick close, we'll close on it. You can move out when you want. We don't care. I mean, we can negotiate that in there. So it just makes it very easy for folks to.
But there's a sacrifice there. So you would say, I mean, you just talked about the benefits, and for certain people, there's an obvious benefit to go that way. The sacrifice is that you may not get as much money as if they come to you and say, would you list this for us? And let's not do this instant sell. Let's do it the old-fashioned way.
Yeah, so the issue, though, I think of a lot of it is, can they do better on the outset of it? Yes, if they just say, hey, let's put it on the market and see how much we can get for it. They probably can do better on the sale that way. There are a lot of folks out there that don't want to fix their house up. They don't want to paint it. They don't put carpet or paint or
which
anything.
Costs money.
Which costs money, and so they wouldn't have to do that with our program. and even though we price a property, let's just say we price it at $400,000, there is a likelihood somewhere in there that a price adjustment might need to be made on that property in order to get a buyer to sell it based on the condition of the home. We actually take on that responsibility. So once we write you the check, then we put it's over. Yeah, and we put it on the market, and if we have to make an adjustment on the price,
but I'm
it's a hit on us.
Knowing you've got a pretty darn good idea what the home's worth. I can't imagine that happening too often where you're like, oh boy, we paid too much for this. Come on, you guys know your stuff.
I would say this, that the seller, I think we talked about it earlier, we live in what we call fantasy land and reality.
Yeah, right.
The fantasy land says, the seller says, I want $400,000 or $500,000 for the home. Yeah. And in reality, it's probably worth $30,000 to $40,000 less than that. So that $30,000 to $40,000, which is the reality side, is where we'll purchase the property, versus the fantasy land side, which is probably not going to sell the property. So yes, we know the valuation of that property for the most part.
Okay. You were saying, and we used my son as an example, buying that first-time home, getting through, and you were saying what he needs to do. What were you showing me a moment ago? The buy-down rate.
We showed the buy-down. Yeah, I was just
lowered 1% for the first 2 years. You do the buy-down, right?
Buy-down yeah. So if you do a 1-1, so it's a buy-down. You buy the rate down 1%. So let's just say we're at 7.5 today. Yep. You buy it down to 6.5 for 2 years. Or you can do what they call a 2-1 buy-down, where you buy it down 2%. Okay, and you get, and it raises that rate 1% within year 1, and then the other % within year 2.
Gotcha.
All right. Now here's what I want to let everybody understand. Some folks out there, and even your son might even think this, well, how do I buy a rate down? You don't buy the rate down. We ask the seller to contribute towards that rate down program. So why would the seller want to buy the rate down program? It's because they want to sell the house.
Yeah. Makes sense.
So so they can either negotiate $10,000 or $15,000 off the price of the home. Some people might say, well, gosh, Bernie, am I not financing that difference in that $5,000 or $10,000 I could get off the price? Could I not finance that? I'm financing that now in the loan. Yeah. Yes, you're financing that in the loan, but you're spreading that over 30 years. Yeah. So if you're never going to own the home 30 years, it doesn't really matter. Yeah. Which most people don't. Every 3 to 5 years, people sell.
Especially if it's the first-time home buyer. You're going to move on from that.
That's exactly right. It's actually a really great program, even though it sounds like, okay, where's the money coming from? We have a solution to where the money's coming from. It's a program that's available to people today. They are getting as creative as they can. We don't want to get too creative, because that's what caused 08. Okay? We can't get too creative. Yeah. But they're getting creative enough that the consumer has an option, or the seller or the buyer has an option today to still turn real estate and make it and justify why it's a good idea.
That's different. That's not an ARM, right? I mean, an adjustable rate. Are they still out there, adjustable rate mortgages? Do people do those anymore? Remember they did those?
That was part of the issue.
That was part of the problem. Yeah. I know. You made me think about that, because I remember ARMs, and you buy into it, and then of course, whoa, you can get. I always thought, no way am I doing an ARM. There was a time I could have considered that. It's like not an option. That's where you buy it, and it just adjusts year to year depending on what the interest rate is.
That's exactly right.
You would say that's a pretty big gamble.
Well, that's why I don't do it anymore.
It got a lot of people in a lot of trouble.
It was really great in the late 90s and early 2000. If people want to really go back and look at what happened, as it was all those creative programs like ARMs. Right. They don't really have those today.
Okay, just want to be clear on that.
It's not a fair way to do business to the buyer.
I hear you. All right, just as we wrap things up, then. The marketplace here, if there are buyers or sellers here now, if someone were to come to you, maybe a new home buyer, and say, I want to find something in the Nashville area, can you do it? And can you do it without spending $800,000?
Absolutely. I mean, the average sales price in Nashville is just over $400,000. Okay. And with creative programs like we just talked about on the show, it makes it very affordable and much more attractive than renting. So the answer to that is yes. And sure, home values have gone up. I mean, again, we talked about 60% of your home value came in the last 36 months. So we'll use this as a great example. If somebody who's watching this would like to have, or would have bought a home 36 months ago, they have $200,000 and $300,000 of equity. Think about that. Just in paying, like someone paying rent versus somebody owning a home over the last 36 months. The balance shift is you lost your rent money for 36 months. Those people who owned a home made $200,000 or $300,000 in the retirement portfolio.
Think about that.
So while you wrote checks and it went out the window,
yeah.
Well, I have a roof over my head. Well, the scenarios are the same. You still have a roof over your head. You're just owning a home versus renting a property.
Yeah.
Right? The difference of that, turn the balance is you have $200,000 to $300,000 on a minimum in your retirement portfolio. People who rented didn't have anything.
Yeah. Again, some people have no choice but to rent because of their circumstance, but in general, I've always thought, I think about all the rent I had paid over the years through college and beyond. It was because I moved around a lot, and I had no choice, but boy, that was money I wish I could have built into equity, and that's what it comes down to.
Well, I think that, there's a lot of folks out there who can't buy and shouldn't buy.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of folks out there that can buy and should buy.
A lot of folks out there that think they can't buy that can buy, which is what you were making the case for my son and others. You may think you can't, but there's a way you can get it done, and ultimately when you do, you can end up owning a home and paying less than you are maybe for rent.
Well, there's a lot of folks out there that can buy and won't buy because they look at the market and go, I'm not getting involved. And some of them will believe it's a political move, like, oh, I'm going to wait till if we change political parties or whatever. This is the interest rate regardless of who sits in that leather chair in the White House.
Yep.
And so this is the reality to paying back all this debt.
Remind folks where you're at. We'll put the information up there as we wrap things up if they want to contact you. And meaning, look, I want you to be my real estate guy, but I have to work with one of your employees.
Why would you have to do that?
Well, I'm sure you're pretty busy. Well, you may do something for me, but let's just be clear. You have a staff, and apparently you have fairly stringent hiring practices.
We do.
Okay, and there you see the information up there, and I assume most of your staffers are from the same school of thought. If you are, or they would not be there.
Well, we only train them this one way.
Occasionally you'll let someone go.
Yeah, I mean, we have minimum standards, right? I mean, it's like you working back here. You can't do what you want to do and be effective. The network has some rules, right?
You have some guidelines. You bring it in, you have to be up to snuff. Right.
That's right. So our agents are high-producing people. They're all educated at a high level through what it is I teach them. And so, yeah, I think either way, or you call me and we can work together.
No, I'm not calling you. I'm calling Wendy.
Well, that's the smart move.
That's his wife, and she runs the show behind the scenes. Bernie, thank you. It's a pleasure. Really good having you come on. Look forward to seeing you again soon. All right.
Appreciate you.
Take a break. Programming note about tomorrow right after this. Stay with us.